Okay, alright. You are a great champion. When you ran, the ground shook, the sky opened, and mere mortals parted. Parted the way to victory, where you'll meet me in the winner's circle and I'll put a blanket of flowers on your back. K.L. Crane to her horse Sonya Dore in the movie Dreamer. We may be a technological generation, but car races like NASCAR still can't compare to the excitement of horse races like the Triple Crown. For centuries, men have pitted their best horses against each other. It has gone from the races of the Bedouin people across the harshness of the desert to the gleaming thoroughbred galloping over a manicured track. But now horse racing has become yet another controversial issue that horse people argue over. Hi, my name is Caitlin Huang. I'm 17 years old, in the Emmett Outlaws Club, and this is my second year in 4-H. Today I will be talking to you about the controversy surrounding the horse racing industry, why it's good, why it's bad, and how it can be resolved to assure a higher level of safety for both horses and humans. I will present both sides of the issue, pro-racing and anti-racing, and finally give some of the ideas and options that I researched that could improve horse racing. And that's my first point, the side and perspective of the anti-racing movement. While the racing industry may not be as big as it was 60, 70 years ago, think Seabiscuit and War Admiral, races like the Triple Crown are still popular. Even this sport of kings, as it is called, has been filled with controversy since the advent of animal rights groups. A few of the points that these groups are pushing on are ages to start the colts racing, the quality of dirt versus synthetic tracks, drug testing, and the use of whips. Protesters of the racing industry have pointed out that racers start working their horses at too young of ages, and that the stress and extreme workouts that these colts face can make them unfit for life after a few years that they race. Racing puts extreme amounts of stress on a developing young horse, they argue, and they can be weakened and damaged for later in life. Small or late developing colts can be worked too hard too fast. Some of the conditions that race horses develop, like broken wind, can be permanent blemishes. Not to mention the emotional trauma that can happen to an impressionable young horse, subject to the, quote, cruel treatment, such as the use of whips. If fears and phobias are developed in a high-strung young colt, they can become irrational and permanently damaged. Because of the delicate bone structure of the thoroughbreds, injuries are almost common in racing life. In previous decades, any sort of break or fracture would mean that the horse was immediately put down. Now, thanks to modern technology, we can heal and save the lives of thousands more horses, if only for them to become broodmares or father the next generation. Animal rights and animal rescue movements are some of the key organizations that are raising this controversy. To prove their point, they use the rough and tough lifestyle that the horses live. Each race could be a colt's last one. While this sounds out of proportion, reading a few books and doing some research on racing tells you that it's really not. At the extreme speeds that these horses are running, accidents are bound to happen on the track, and a slight joggle can turn into a deadly incident. Everyone was reminded of this when 8 Bells, a black thoroughbred filly, right here, broke both of her front ankles after finishing second in the Kentucky Derby. And this is when she was down on the track. And this is as she was finishing second to Big Brown in 2008 Kentucky Derby. She collapsed across the finish line and was put down right on track. Her tragic end was like touching a match kerosene for the People of Equal Treatment of Animals organization, otherwise known as PETA, who staged protests at the following Triple Crown race, the Preakness. The protesters carried signs that said 8 Bells, race to death, as you can see here. It doesn't help that racing fans are so grieved over Barbaroux's tragic accident. In the 2006 Preakness race, Barbaro shattered his right rear leg at the start, leaving thousands of fans looking on in horror as he limped away in an equine ambulance. After an 8-month-long fight to save him, he was euthanized after developing laminitis as a result of his injuries. The PETA organization is demanding drastic reforms and eventually wants to shut racing down completely. However, that isn't likely to happen, since these thoroughbreds were bred for centuries to race. Owners, trainers, and jockeys aren't going to sit idly by and let animal rights organizations take away their livelihoods. Now to my second point, the pro-racing side. Pro-racing has been in the majority of this argument in the past, which accounts for the continued popularity of the sport. The young and old, city or country people, are stirred alike by the beauty and power of 12 sleek and beautiful thoroughbreds racing for the finish. Pro racers are in the majority because the racing protesters have not yet come to the level that other debates, such as horse slaughter, have. The people who make racing happen, owners, trainers, and jockeys, want their horses to be as safe as they can be. Their thoroughbreds are their pride, their joy, and their investment. A few of the vets, trainers, and fans that were interviewed by the media after 8 Bells' death pointed out that it is illogical to say that all of them treat their horses like impersonal commodities. After tragic end of the 2008 Kentucky Derby when 8 Bells broke both front ankles and was put down on the track, a fan of the racing industry at the following Triple Crown race, the Preakness, was quoted as saying, "Of course it gets your attention," 22-year-old Sergio Gaboret said. "I wasn't expecting this, but I don't think horse racing is a cool sport." Of course, the argument comes up that these horses love what they do. 8 Bells jockey Gabriel Saez issued a statement 2 days after her fatal race. "I remain heartbroken over 8 Bells, and I want to let her many fans know that she never gave me the slightest indication before or during the race that there was anything bothering her," Saez said. "All I could sense underneath me was how eager she was to race. I was so proud of her performance and of the opportunity to ride her in my first Kentucky Derby, all of which adds to my sadness." In response to the outbreak of protests against the injuries these horses suffered, Doctors Jim Moorhead and David Wilson offered a sketchy hope for future safety. "Though the season's been tumultuous, injuries and breakdowns have always been a part of thoroughbred racing. The number of injuries has actually gone down," said Dr. Moorhead, alumni of MU College of Veterinary Medicine and resident veterinarian at Three Chimneys Farm in Kentucky, where 8 Bells was born. Dr. Moorhead said that the large improvements have been made in the industry, such as the steady decline of races that allow 2-year-olds to run. But he makes no bones about the fact that there are problems with the industry. Dr. Wilson, a professor of equine surgery, says, "I've seen horses just trotting across the pasture and break their legs. Sure, people can blame racing because the horses are pushed to the max, but they are doing a job that they love. I've seen things in the press suggesting that the jockey and trainer made mistakes," says Moorhead, who foaled or delivered 8 Bells. "They didn't. It was part of the risk. It's a freak accident." People who ride their horses under any sort of competition know how important their horse's heart for the sport is. Watching race horses that are running to win, running because it was what they were born and bred to do, is one of the most beautiful sights in the world. They are putting every bit of their heart and soul into each race. Conclusion, a 4-H'er's perspective. 8 Bells, Barbaro, and all of the unknown horses who died are telling us something, that things need to change, that they need to be different. I love watching horses race, and even though I was heartbroken over 8 Bells' death that day, I don't agree that racing should be eliminated. These horses were born and bred to race for centuries, and taking away their competitive lives doesn't really solve the problem. What does give a solution? Working to eliminate drugging, stop horses being raced so young, and looking into safer track materials is what's going to resolve this issue. Shutting down tracks and getting rid of racing is no solution for the people and horses involved here. Moving towards safer and sometimes more restrictive rules is. There's a very small amount of research that has been gathered on synthetic tracks, but early data shows that accidents can be cut by about 50%. If you told me, "Look, we have a device where these horses can run on pills and never get hurt," I'd say, "Where do I sign?" 2-time Derby winning trainer Nick Zito said. Rick Arthur, veterinarian and equine medical director for the racing board, agrees that more improvements should and need to be made. We do have an obligation to provide the safest racing for horses that we can. You have an animal competing that has been involved in civilization of man from the very beginning. There's a special relationship between horses that dice and ping pong balls don't have. In conclusion, I've told you both sides of the racing debate, pro-racers, anti-racers, using the fatal death of 8 Bells as an example of how both sides view the racing industry. My sources are ColumbiaMissourian.com, AJWashingtonNet.net, and SNBCSports.MSNBC.com, WATE.com, PasadenaStarNews.com, CBSNews.com, and PETA.org. Thank you for your time. Are there any questions?
Yeah, I have a question. What are synthetic, you might have said this, but I must have missed it. What are synthetic tracks made of?
They're made of synthetic fibers. Honestly, I haven't done a lot of research into that, but they are trying to, Santa Anita has one.
So instead of like sand, it's just synthetic material.
Yeah,
Okay.
and it never gets wet, so they don't have to worry about mud.
And what's the base in it? I need to do research.
I'm curious.
What are these synthetic things?
Yeah.
What an arena like that.
What horse races have you been to before?
I've been down over to LeBois Park. I've seen those, and I watched the Kentucky Derby on TV, and it was horrible when 8 Bells was put to sleep, because we were watching it and we were like, "Oh, the horse is down. Is she gonna be okay?" And then all of a sudden they're like, "Oh, we put her to sleep," and we're like, "You can't just do that."
Yeah, tried
So,
again. She
Yeah.
broke an ankle.
Yeah,
There's
she
no
had this-
rehab for him.
but she broke through the skin, so her bones were grinding in the dirt. And it was horrible.
Oh. Gosh.
Yes.
I've been to the Kentucky Derby a few years ago, and it's really cool if you ever get a
Mhm.
chance to do
Yeah.
that.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah,
Good
thank
job.